Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dakota Frandsen, Specialist of the Strange, and welcome back to the brand new episode of FrandsenFiles. For this episode, I thought it would be a little bit more appropriate to have a proper sit down and answer some questions I get a lot of from people. So maybe you can understand a little bit more about what all's going on, things about the company, things about my situation, or just about anything in between. Because let's face it, it gets to be all over the place, and I haven't really done a very good job of trying to document everything. Now, granted, there's some reasons I have where I have to maintain a certain level of privacy in order to protect individuals that are involved in my stories. But that doesn't necessarily stop the fact that I can share things I've learned from these stories. So that's what we're going to be here today to do. Today is April 13th, 2024. At the time of this recording, the plan is to try to put these together, schedule them in advance so we have a regular stream of content. So that way you all can be able to take in everything, have a steady stream of things going on when, quite frankly, it's hard for me to juggle everything sometimes, and you'll get to see a lot more about what's going on behind the scenes, hopefully. So, for this, I've had people I've can't talk right now. So for this, like I said, the plan is to try to answer some questions that a lot of you have had over the years since I've started getting into the supernatural as a whole, especially with the likely extraterrestrial connections. So the questions basically will spring from that to things about the company, things about the shows, a little bit in between. And I hope I'm able to answer some of your lingering questions so we can move on to brand new mysteries. So much love. Let's get on with the first question. Now, shall we?
What is it that inspired you to create Bald and Bonkers? Why offer so much when the focus is on the supernatural? What lies in the future of Bald and Bonkers as a whole?
Well, for those of you who don't know, the reason why Bald and Bonkers was created was because Chris and I had disagreements with a previous organization that we met through in regards to some rather serious things that came up. I'm not going to go into a whole heck of a lot of detail. It's a real messed up situation, and people are still trying to recover. So I want to give them a chance to fairly do that. But this was the initial idea behind the Bald and Bonkers show was to allow Chris and I to really explore these topics unhindered by any sort of outside influence. And what do I mean by that is essentially individuals who felt that they should control how every little thing's being done, or we should avoid certain topics because it may be sensitive to some people. This and that, you don't want to offend people. And the thing was, we didn't like that approach because it hindered a lot of obstacles. It hindered a lot of potential progress, I should say. And what I mean by that is that when we're having to restrain what we explore, what we talk about, you're hindering the ability to truly connect with people. Let's face it, if you're into the supernatural, whether you want to focus just on ghosts or cryptids or UFOs, chances are you're a bit of an outcast. There's things where normal life kind of pushed you in that direction for whatever reasons may be. Sometimes it's just a genuine curiosity. Other times there may have been something pretty serious that happened to you, and you're trying to understand how that these things are even possible. It's like I always say, you're not necessarily crazy because you're saying you've seen these things, but you will go crazy trying to understand them. And I'm speaking from personal experience on that. So, as the show got to be a little bit more developed, the idea was to turn it into an official company. But Chris Chris was initially the one who pushed to try to put it together, an official company together, but he didn't want to take on any of the official roles. He saw that I, as he and I got to work together, I mean, if you count the latest shows, now granted, a lot of our early stuff has been deleted because the original YouTube channel was taken down due to copyright claims. We didn't find out about that till later, but Chris and I are pushing almost almost 400 hours worth of episodes, worth of shows. And that's just that's going off of the shows we've appeared on together, the shows that we've recorded on our own, and even guest appearances. We're pushing almost 400 hours. It's also why we tried to, implement a bit of a, recharge time whenever the show starts to hit a bit of a slow period. We don't have any guests, or we're just not feeling the spark to start creating. Kick up, we'll take a break just to kind of recharge and, observe what happens in the world and come back at it stronger than ever. So, a lot of people have asked me, well, Dakota, why do you do all these like little courses about podcasting and business and stuff like that when the whole premise was built on the foundation of the supernatural? Well, again, this kind of goes back to the different sorts of individuals that are brought into this type of field. Yes, they all may be outcasts in some way about their life, but when you really dig into this type of stuff, you're digging into people's cultures, their beliefs, their backgrounds, their histories. When you look into the folklore, the mythologies, the cultures, stuff like that when you truly observe all the things that you should observe when dealing with the supernatural, you're looking at what builds a human, what shapes them into who they become later on in life. And let's face it, there's a lot of us who have all sorts of different aspects. Some of us, when we have a little bit of downtime, we may like to turn on a video game. Or, maybe we're like into art, or maybe we like making movies. We have our own businesses we want to run, this and that. We all come from different sorts of situations. But damn near every single one of us who goes into this has an aspect of us to where you have to be a bit of an entrepreneur. And with that, what you can do is you could create potential side income for what you do, even if you try to make it as readily available as possible. So, because there's so many people trying to find, some sort of little side income, maybe because, just with the inflation situation going on in the world right now, or they're wanting to learn different topics, to build their own brands, their own images, their own businesses, but they don't really have the necessary resources to pay off all these different services. The reality of it is, with everything that is readily available right now to anybody who has a stable enough internet connection, you can learn pretty much anything there is. You can pick up any sort of new skill and not have to put yourself in debt. I mean, like with Bald and Bonkers Network Academy, that's sort of a side brand that's coming with video courses. It has its own books. It has It's also going to be coming out soon with its own like little audio tutorials that are going to be available through like iTunes, Amazon Music, places like that. With all of these, the idea is to try to build yourself up from scratch. Say, like, there's a podcast course that I put together on my own that shows the process of how I take what you see when, say, like when Chris and I record the Bald and Bonkers show, how we take that, we distribute it to all these different platforms as both video and audio versions, and get it promoted, get it distributed, all for less than what it costs for a daily Starbucks addiction. It is possible to make your dreams happen. You just got to be smart about it. You got to be smart about it, willing to put in the work. And sometimes, whether you're dealing with the supernatural or whether you're dealing with regular civilian life or trying to get yourself in that grind, you're not exactly sure where to look. So, creating sort of a main distribution where everybody can find something they can take home. Finding one little major platform where anybody can get on and find something that will help them. That is probably one of the most valuable resources you can give to people. And as far as what the future holds, we'll see. We're going to keep expanding. We're going to keep bringing up new courses. We're going to try to bring in new shows. And anybody who wants to jump in on the distribution platforms, our streaming network, Bonkers TV, which is available on baldandbonkers.net, or Bonkers TV Plus when we finally get that together, you'll be able to put that together. We'll also want to try, it's also the plan to try to build some kind of income revenue for the people that jump in on this. So that way, they have something coming in for their efforts. They may do it for free, do it for fun, but let's face it, we all got bills to pay. And until the day comes where the financial system has no real meaning anymore, and let's face it, everybody panics about everything getting switched to a digital currency. Let's face it, the negligence of global leaders in economics have made it to where a majority of the currency flowing through the world right now is practically digital, because the entire economic system is based on roughly 10% of all the world's money is physical currency. So something's going to collapse very soon. It's just a matter of finding out when. But nevertheless, as technology gets to become a little bit more accessible, a little bit more out there, it's going to become more and more ingrained in our lives. And as much as, there be some of us who want to cling on to the old methods because some of the newer, say, like artificial intelligence and things like that, sort of take away the beauty, the soul of it. Let's face it, unless there's some global cataclysm that sends us back to the Stone Age, this technology is not going anywhere. It's only going to keep improving. And if an individual doesn't try to make strives to improve with it, to evolve, they're going to fall behind. And there's some truly magnificent things getting ready to happen in the world. And that if you don't learn to evolve, learn to become something better, you're going to fall behind. You're going to fall into some very messed up patterns that a lot of us are struggling to try to break free from. So the whole point behind Bald and Bonkers is to acknowledge that the roads we may take may drive us mad. They may drive us crazy to a point we're pulling out our hair and questioning how we're not strapped into a straitjacket yet. But we're making things happen. That is what it's all about. And it will always continue to be about that.
Just before the holidays, you mentioned you were taking a break because your sister was about to have the baby. Any updates you are willing to share? Will we get to see the baby in the near future?
Yes. I did take a little bit of a break. Not fully. I still did shows and such, but I did kind of step back a little bit. I still built up the company. I wasn't going to just put that on the shelf right as we're getting momentum going. But yes, my younger sister did have a baby girl. 4 months old at the time of this recording. She is doing very well. She's getting her mother's attitude, so that's going to be fun when she's a teenager. As far as seeing the baby here on the show in the future, I'm being very careful about who I show her to. Just because, one, yes, when you're in the public eye, that sometimes draws in some nasty attention. But in the same time, I'm only the uncle, even though I've pretty much stepped in as a surrogate father role. I am just the uncle. She's not my kid to, decide on things on like that. And there's also a bit of a little messed up situation, as some people close to me already know, where I have to take into account both the safety of my sister and her baby. So, as far as seeing her in sort of a public space, probably not, unless you happen to see me out and about with her in public, but that's about it. So, baby's good. She's growing well. In 4 months, she's already doubled her birth weight, so she's definitely one of my family. And she's already decided who her favorite relative is. Not that I mind, but somebody's got to look out for that little one.
How do you screen potential guests for the Bald and Bonkers show?
How do we screen potential guests? Well, first off, we try to get a vibe of who they are as a person. Not naturally, as you're doing these types of shows, you have your own little like wish lists of, some big names maybe you want to try to get on, and maybe it's someone you've always wanted to meet, as childhood heroes or something like that. Chris and I, we've actually been fortunate enough to actually have some of our heroes actually come on board. Chris, he was absolutely ecstatic when we had Dave Schrader on. That was one of his favorites, and Dave's pretty bad about checking his emails, so that took some legwork in order to make that happen. But that was a good show. That was a good show. For me, when we had Barry Fitzgerald on, that was one of the ones I really liked watching. I like to watch some of those ghost hunting shows back in the day. Not as much anymore because And Neil Story, he's another good one. I like talking with him. He's definitely an interesting personality behind that guy, but he seems like a good old man. But as far as say we're screening, we try to make the platform as readily available to anybody who's willing to partake. So as far as screening, we try to basically just get a vibe for the person. As I was trying to say before I got a little sidetracked, we try to get a vibe for what they're doing, this person, who they are, if they're serious about the type of stuff they're putting out, things like that. I will be redefining it's probably going to be done by the time this comes out, but I will be redefining the sign up process that I've had on the Bald and Bonkers website for people to be able to sign up to be potential guests, because there's this mentality I've noticed, and it kind of disturbs me, where these people there's individuals who make it known that they are wanting to achieve some sort of fame, right? But they're not wanting to put in the work. They're wanting the ego boost of having people ask them. And it's just like, you know what? Sometimes you got to put in the work to get yourself out there. So we're going to make that available. We're going to have an application form where people can put in, their links, for us to check them out, tell us about what's going on, whether they're part of a ghost hunting group looking to promote themselves, or they just wrote a book, or there's someone who's had their own little weird experience and they're wanting to share it. That's going to be part of the screening process. See if, first off, the main thing we want is to know that this person's not going to be an asshole and they're true to their heart. They may get things totally mixed up. They may be completely sideways on how they're understanding things working, but it's more important that the person is actually trying. They're wanting to get out there to try to understand what's happening. That to me speaks more volumes than what knowledge they hold. I'm a firm believer in this philosophy, and that is that the fool who is willing to learn is so much more of a valuable asset than the genius who won't put in the effort. The fool who is willing to learn is so much more valuable than the genius who won't put in the effort. And I think that's something that a lot of people should probably take to heart. Because if the fool is willing to learn, they can become better, and they may even be able to spot things that you didn't notice. Or as far as the genius that doesn't want to put in the effort, you could have all the information in the world, but if you're not willing to share, or if you're not doing something with it to make things happen, what's the point of even having it in the first place? But that's just sort of my philosophy on it. There could be situations where things are going to be a little different, but as far as when it comes to wanting to make things happen, trying to understand the supernatural or whatever the case may be, again, the fool who is willing to learn is so much more valuable than the genius who won't do anything. Because quite frankly, the genius that won't do anything is usually nowhere near as smart as they think they are. Let's face it. But that does kind of lead into another question that's going to be coming up here shortly. So let's move on. Let's move on before I go on too much of a tangent.
Where did the name Specialist of the Strange come from?
Where did the name Specialist of the Strange come from? It sort of started off as kind of a joke, kind of like Bald and Bonkers did. The name itself, Bald and Bonkers, that just kind of came off as a little bit of I was looking for some kind of alliteration to help promote what Chris and I were doing when we first started doing podcasts together. And it just kind of stuck. So we just kind of took the name and ran with it. Specialists of the Strange, that also was the case. Because, anytime there was a real weird incident, like a mass UFO sighting in my area, or there was a ledge haunting, or this or that, people always seemed to be kind of intimidated that I was a part of the incident, or I already had a pretty in-depth knowledge of it. So a very good friend of mine was like, well, what's your thoughts, Mr. Specialist of the Strange? He's kind of an airhead, and so he was being sarcastic about it, but I was like, I got to thinking about it a little bit more after that conversation. I was like, that actually sounded kind of cool. Specialist of the Strange. I like that. Kind of gives a superhero sort of vibe to it. So I asked him, hey, I know you were kind of being a smart ass with me, but mind if I steal that and run with it? And he was like, oh, sure, Dakota. Go ahead. And to this day, he's kind of shocked with how far things have gone. But nevertheless, Specialist of the Strange, that was a joke from a very good friend of mine that just stuck. And needless to say, it's a mantle that I always somehow manage to live up to.
Dakota, I apologize if this seems rude, but the stories you shared are a bit out there. Why do you judge what others say they have gone through when you aren't physically there to know better?
All right, I think I know what this one is about, and I understand. The way you worded it could have come across that I'll be on as kind of rude, but I know what you mean. So no worries. I'm not gonna fire off at you. I know my stories are out there. I fully admit it, and I always try to walk into things with a certain prefix, pretense to try to reiterate to people that I'm still learning, so I may be wrong, and which is going to be something that I'm going to have to elaborate on with something I mentioned in the little teaser trailer for this program. But again, this kind of goes back to the whole screening guest thing. I fully believe that there's not going to be a lot that happens in regards to being able to debunk certain stories, certain claims, until the day comes. We all have excuse me, we all have some sort of ability to be able to take physical memory, convert it into a digital file, and be able to upload it onto a computer. Whether it's recording dreams, something like Neuralink as an example. I fully believe that will be something like that would be a valuable asset, but nevertheless, the reason why it may come across that I judge others is because I question their intentions for sharing the information. Now, granted, may sound kind of hypocritical coming from someone who is building a business, building a brand around being someone who has dealt with some rather strange incidents in his life and just trying to make sense of it. Everybody else could very well just be doing the same thing. But if someone's story changes a little too much, if someone seems to try to take control of a situation, control of a narrative, or constantly try to poke at certain individuals, that sets off some red flags. And there's been individuals who have got somewhat hostile towards me because I mentioned that individuals have come forward questioning their legitimacy. And that's sign number one that they themselves aren't necessarily telling the truth. Now, speaking from personal experience, having, gone through certain situations where the was very emotionally charged, and it was me essentially peeling back the layers, trying to be vulnerable in order to share certain details, and only to turn around and have someone stab you in the back with it. That hurts. That makes you not want to trust people, especially when you're already in a spot where you're questioning your own sanity. But in the same light, there's individuals who seem more focused on trying to be someone famous rather than be someone true. Because let's face it, yes, there are individuals out there who have essentially sold themselves to these rather malicious groups in order to achieve fame and fortune. These groups would take advantage of them, humiliate them, things like that. These groups do exist. They are out there, and they have the resources to truly make people genuinely rich and all that. And because these people are willing to essentially sell themselves for that, a lot of who they are, a lot of their soul, their very essence really gets compromised. And naturally, there comes a couple different aspects that one has to take into consideration. Is these are these motivations ego based? Are they trying to make themselves feel better about who they are as an individual? Because again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that everybody who gets involved in this type of thing is somewhat of an outcast, and they may have had situations unfold to where they felt belittled by the public, and now they're getting attention. They may not necessarily know how to know how to process that newfound attention on them, so they might get a little crazy about it. That's why I try to screen people as much as I can, and if I have any reason to genuinely doubt the individual, I will not be dealing with them much longer. Because it sounds kind of harsh. It feels kind of cold to say it, but I will say this. How can you trust someone who's feeling the need to lie to themselves? Now, you can try to be there as a friend, try to call them out on it, saying, hey, something's not right about what you're doing. And if they are a genuine friend, they'll take it into consideration. But there's also been plenty of incidents where there is, once these individuals are confronted, there is an active effort on their part to try to withhold information from certain parties that called them out. And if you find evidence of that, yeah, that individual should probably not be trusted. And that's how I view things. I will admit wholeheartedly, I have misjudged individuals in the past. It has happened. May happen again. We make mistakes. That is part of our human experience. But what matters from those mistakes, it's not necessarily that they're made, it's what you do to learn from them. Even if it's somehow a situation that was so bad that someone got hurt, what it is you learn from them and your actions to try to follow through with course correction will speak more volumes than the actual incident itself. Usually. Now, if you really messed up, and now naturally there's certain things that you just don't bounce back from if you're ever experienced that type of abuse from another. But still, again, how someone goes to process those incidents, how they try to overcome them, what they learn from them, what they take from them, that speaks more volumes about who they are and whether or not that's an individual you want to keep around. And yes, you may not physically be joined at the hip to determine the full truth, but when you actually pay attention, you'll see plenty of the signs that'll tell you whether or not someone is being genuine or they are being purposely what's the word I'm thinking of? Disingenuine. They are purposely being disingenuous. Now, if someone's legitimately saying something and they got details mixed up, as long as they're willing to say, hey, I goofed. If they're willing to say that, you can still trust them. But if they are purposely being dishonest, then yeah, that's probably not someone you want to be keeping around. But anyway, that's enough of that. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question. I know that they're going to be a little bit more engaging with the good stuff.
What are your recommendations for people to try researching the supernatural if they are having experiences of their own? What are some of the obstacles that might come in the way if people follow this advice?
Now, this is where things get a little tricky. Now, you may hear some individuals out there. I'm not saying that in any sort of malicious manner. I'm just saying that it's something I've noticed quite a bit of people use, and saying that you should follow what resonates with your soul because your soul will know the truth, right? And that may be legitimate advice. But the main thing is that I have a problem with is that there's a lot of people who still don't know how to truly listen to that. And they let their own biases, their own judgments kind of get in the way of what's true to them. So if you are in fact someone who believes they may be experiencing some kind of supernatural phenomenon, ETs, ghosts, this or that, first off, the first course of action is always take 5 seconds to just breathe, focus, evaluate. Try to take it. Okay, what is it that you just saw? If you have the option or something near you to where you can write it down, whether it's you're opening a Word document on your phone or if you happen to have some kind of journal on you, write it down. And the sooner you write it down from after the incident has taken place, you try to get it as fresh in your mind as possible. Always do your best to try to document things. Secondly, if you're able to, try to get some sort of evidence. The second you write down your incidents, those journals can be taken as evidence of something taking place. But if you're able to, there's a couple different things you can do. There's one, you can get, if you have a little extra money on the side, please don't make yourself go broke. Don't max out credit cards, all that fun shit. Don't try to spend money on the most high-end equipment and blah 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 because this person says so. More often than not, if you see a recommendation like that, they're getting some sort of compensation. My big thing is that obviously you're not going to have if you have physical equipment on you, like some sort of voice recorder, some sort of camera, you're not always going to have it running 24/7. If you have like a security camera set up, there may be situations where the DVR device goes to reboot, you have a power outage, power fluctuations, things like that. If you have like something that runs off of batteries, eventually those batteries are going to die. You're going to need to either charge them up or get new ones. You can spend some money to get yourself some equipment, depending on what it is you have going on. If you have some sort of ghost or ET phenomenon, you can look into. Well, let's see. I know I have one sitting here. There it is. You can look into some sort of EMF gauges that tell you that these beings can actually interact with and cause it to light up. Now, chances are you may run into similar issues that I do, and it's that major incidents always seem to happen. Excuse me. When you don't have any of the equipment physically on your person, it is one of the most frustrating things about this. So, a lot of what I try to have people do is while yes, you can do what you can to document, there's a couple different things you can do. And I say this because chances are you're going to have a cell phone on you at some point. Even if you try to keep it away from you for whatever reason, at night you leave it at home to go out for a walk. Chances are you're going to have a phone on you. Now, the reason why I always have a phone on me is because, well, just in case there's a medical emergency and I need to get somewhere fast. Not just because of family, but maybe some friends that are having a crisis, clients, things like that. One thing you can do is obviously use your phone's camera. Now, I will say this. This is something that on a recent episode of the Bald and Bonkers show, Chris pointed out, and I researched it after the show, and he was mostly correct. It's Chris. He gets details mixed up from time to time, but a lot of newer model phones do have an artificial intelligence integrated into their camera systems that can't necessarily be turned off. So that may cause some of the stereotypical equipment glitches that you're familiar with. You may be familiar with in, say, like alien, interactions with potential alien craft. There are a number of obstacles that might come in the way, but especially if you utilize something like this. But that is an entire video in itself. But this requires you to be knowledgeable about the devices you have, constant research. Say, like, you think you're being visited in the night. My recommendation, try to look up any sleep talking apps, something that will be set off if it ever picks up a noise. Now, obviously, if you have children in the house, you have pets that get rambunctious in the middle of the night, you're going to have some interference. If it's, the time of year where the weather starts getting colder and you have heaters on in the house, that's going to cause interference. You need to be aware of your surroundings and know what is normal. Again, this is entire subject could be a video on its own. Now, worst case scenario, if you decide to do the sleep talking app trick with your phone, usually the worst case scenario is that you're going to find out the type of random silly shit you say in the middle of the night. And find out why your partner in the bedroom may be looking at you kind of funny in the mornings. But that is going to be a future video to go a little bit more in depth, because let's face it, we're not always going to have equipment on us. So we're going to need to get creative about what we have readily available. So there are some tricks that I would like to show you on that. And that will be, and as far as things to watch out for, that will also be included in that video. Which this leads me to the next question. So go ahead.
If you're genuinely being abducted, why don't you have more evidence?
Just to kind of elaborate a little further of why certain individuals who claim they're having abduction experiences don't have more evidence. Well, when it comes to, say, like dealings with the Galactic Federation, there's rules about what can be exchanged between upstairs and downstairs, in a matter of speaking. And as far as, gathering evidence of what's going on up there, people need to realize it is still a military operation, and they have to maintain a level of secrecy. Say like it's that story from that circulated during the filming of Top Gun Maverick, that while filming at one of the Air Force bases, I should say, apparently the camera crew caught a glimpse of something they weren't supposed to see. The military seized the cameras and deleted the footage. Now, in regards to why abductees don't have more evidence, well, they can use the sleep talking app to try to gather voices, as well as known technological interference. Because chances are, if they have a legitimate visitation to where they're being abducted at night, the radiation will cause static-like interference. You'll hear white noise come through when there's nothing on that should be playing white noise. I've had that happen a couple of occasions. In fact, that was how I was able to isolate my Star Wife's voice, and there's going to be an update on that here soon, to use AI in order to have her speak for the Valentine's special. And I know this question irritates a lot of people because a lot of abductees because it's getting kind of thrown at us harshly, but the radiation from the craft itself will cause electromagnetic interference. And technically speaking, I do not recommend anybody try this. If you do, take proper precautions, and I am not legally responsible for any messes you make. But if you actually look up videos of people taking their phones to record, say, like samples of uranium, the radiation coming off of that uranium will usually start causing the image to start getting blurry, getting staticky, things like that, especially on a newer smartphone. Now, there's some of you that tried to legitimately suggest, oh, why not take like an old school film camera? Again, the radiation is the issue. The radiation will actually essentially burn through the film to where it is unusable. Now, radio show host Rob McConnell, he asked me a question during one of my appearances with him, and it's why don't they have like a souvenir shop? Well, they technically do. It's just that there's certain litigations as to, again, what can be sent back and forth. Every now and then, a person is able to physically gather something, but that is usually for a specific purpose. And that is something to be taken on a case-by-case circumstance. For those of you who constantly toss this counter argument of if all these things are happening, why isn't there more evidence if everybody has some kind of phone on them? Well, one, you have to take into consideration the environmental factors that will essentially screw with any electronics you may have. You also have to take into consideration the psychological factor. There could be an aspect where the person experiencing these things is in a state of genuine shock, and they may not register to bring out their cameras until it's too late. It's happened to me on a few occasions, and I've dealt with this for quite some time. You have to take everything into consideration, but on a case-by-case circumstance. There's not enough known about this type of stuff to really have a one-size-fits-all solution. I'm just going to say that now. So if someone is sharing their story and they don't really necessarily have anything to back it up, don't toss them out just yet. Give them time, work with them. The story will come through. The proof will come if you look long enough. Which actually brings me to this next question, which was asked by a viewer.
How much of your past lives have you been able to integrate or remember? Have you met any others, apart from wife and daughter, from your star cluster?
So, I believe this was Roger that asked this. Well, I'm not really sure how to really quantify the answer. I'll admit I've been kind of lax as far as, going into memory recalls on a regular basis to try to, improve it like a muscle. Just life situations. So I can't accurately put say like a number on how much of past lives I've been able to integrate or remember. Slowly but surely, I am remembering incidents from work in the Galactic Federation because aspects of that life are leaking into this. To where this kind of goes for your follow-up question, have I met any others from my star cluster? I wouldn't necessarily say that they would be from my star cluster, but I have met others who are from that previous previous or concurrent incarnation, or whatever the case may be. Time travel makes things so confusing. But yes, I have met others. It's not just my wife and daughter. Yeah, have to remember. I have two daughters and a son, with another daughter on the way. As a matter of fact, that's Starside. I'm going to elaborate on that with the next question. Through the interviews on the Bald and Bonkers show with Elena Denon and a little bit with the one with Danny Henderson, I will say this. Yes, we have. I have run into individuals I've known from before this incarnation. Let's go with that. I like that. Because technically, I'll go back to that Pleiadian body if when this body goes to die. But say, like, through the interviews with Elena Denon, especially, that's how someone able to reconnect with Thor Han. I have actually managed to find some of the kids that were rescued from the abduction missions that Thor Han and I flew through. It's kind of weird because the time when they were rescued was let me rephrase. It's very weird to be running into individuals I've known from that other life who are, well, I feel like I've known them since they were practically young kids, even though they themselves are older than me. In fact, if I recall correctly, I do remember kind of meeting in passing Elena before I was born. But again, very much in passing. I don't remember any significant conversations taking place. She just happened to be with Thorhan at the time, and I have just happened to be in close proximity to where they happen to go. It's been very interesting because I'll say this next part of it for this follow up that quite a few of you have been wondering since I posted the teaser.
Any updates on your star family? The teaser you posted had quite the reveal.
Yes, there are some major updates. Now, I need to say this directly. Back in October, I went it was end of September leading into October. I went to the Galactic Spiritual Informers Conference in Orlando, Florida, hosted by the lovely Danny Henderson. For some reason, I had this tug to go there. One, I just thought that because one of the kids that Thorhan and I rescued from the abductions was actually going to be in the audience as well, it was going to be the first time we would actually met in this life. I thought this would be a good chance for me to, physically meet individuals I knew from back then to see if it triggered any sorts of memories. However, while I was there, it was on that Saturday night, the night of the disco. Well, it was from day one, as the speeches were going, things were already happening. There was points where, as certain guest speakers were talking, Elena, Tony, Danny, John Charles, specifically, I've noticed it to be a little bit strong. These sensations be a bit stronger. There would be points where it would seem like this image of the inside of a spaceship was being overlaid with what I was seeing at the conference. I was in two places at once. Come to find out, it's because my son stopped by. The night of the disco, we were going, I had a shirt with the little fake gold chains on it, and was wearing an afro. We were dancing away. I was starting to get this kind of ringing in my ears. It wasn't tinnitus. It was like there was this pulse to it. And I knew that whenever this particular frequency came about, someone upstairs was trying to get my attention and I needed to get out of there. And I figured it was my son right away. So I had to leave the disco, go back to my hotel room, which was just right across the street from where the conference was being held. It was there that my son showed up in the room, and he looked pretty nervous. And he was. I knew he was wanting to tell me something, but something about what he needed to say made him nervous. So I was trying to talk to him, say, "Hey, I know the situation's weird, but I'm still your father. You can talk to me if something's going on." He's like, "I know, Dad, but you want to go for a ride?" And naturally, I was not going to say no to getting a ride around in a spaceship because it's fucking fun. Um, so I went with my son. We went joyriding. The next thing I know, we flew around for a little bit. And then we started to come back, and he said, "We got a little bit of time left. You want to check on your friends?" I was like, "All right, sure. What do you mean?" He let me sit back in this chair and take control of surveillance systems that the craft had on board. It was able to integrate into me fairly well, and I was able to use the ship to kind of look down at the people who were at the conference. Some of the ladies who had a whole lot of glitter on were just leaving the disco. I could see the hotel from the front. They had two towers, then they had the courtyard. Then I could see one of the guests I knew that was at the conference there recording us as we were in the air. I've mentioned this before on the show. Then the way the ship worked, it ran its focus, it integrated with my own bodily systems to where, say, if I wanted to check on, Jane Doe over here, it'll start looking for her, focus on her image. I can even zoom in on her as if the camera was this close, and the clarity of it was amazing. Then again, I was wanting to check on someone else because there was someone hanging about her that just didn't rub me right. I didn't know a whole lot about the guy. It's just that when I got these sensations before, it didn't mean they were a very nice person. So I wanted to check on her. Apparently, she was still in the building. I was able to use the craft systems to see through the walls like they weren't there and check on her. She thought she was okay. My son realizes where I'm looking. It's like he looks at me. It's like, "Don't worry about her. She's gonna be okay." I see why you like her. I look at him and was like, "All right, what do you mean?" It's like, "Well, she kind of reminds me of Mom." The second he said that, I'm just like, "Wait, what? What do you mean?" I'll be honest. There was this inclination that I've had for a while on whether or not the mother of my children, who is a woman from the Sirius B star system, may have actually been an envoy. I've had that feeling for a while, but just didn't know who. And with this latest revelation, I've started to realize why I've had those feelings. But my son goes to look at me. He's like, "All right, come on, Dad. You already know about how this stuff works. Don't you think it's a little weird that Mom never came to get you herself? Someone always had to bring you to her?" Then I got to thinking through Elena's books, where she describes a very similar situation with Jean-Charles Moyen and Melanie Perez, where Melanie's other body came down to talk with John Charles for a little bit, but could not stay because having two bodies of the same soul would essentially cause a paradox and would cause problems. The second that it dawned on me, I'm just like, okay, what is she? She's here. Where is she? You know, I've been looking for her. It's like, Dad. My son goes, Dad, just calm down. She's not down there. She's not at that event, but she's coming very soon. She's going to, she's already made contact with you before. You two just didn't realize it yet. Mom's coming. She's been on Earth longer than you have. Just wait. She's coming. And with that revelation, that's when my son looked at me and was like, you need to go now, but I'll be in touch. The other part of that conversation was that I would soon get to go back home to Talihara because with the addition of the Negamuk Nomopo to the Galactic Federation of Worlds, the diplomatic efforts of Akfaru were starting to sway a little bit more favorable direction where I could go home where I had family waiting for me. My son didn't really specify that it was through the Negamuk. All he really just said is just listen to Elena. She's going to have that. She has that information already. The second you hear Elena say it, you're going to know. And that's when she revealed at the conference about the Negamuk joining the Galactic Federation, which in turn kind of led some credibility to certain visions I've had, but I'm still trying to place those on a timeline, if you know what I mean. So, a couple months later, there's a couple people that came forward asking me questions because they believe they may have had some sort of ET experiences and they needed to talk to me. There was also an interesting thing that came up. It may not necessarily mean much, but there was something I noticed about one of the reflections videos I did. It was kind of the final one. I'd gone home, pretty much just gone home, went straight to work just because of how tight I packed the schedule. But basically I got emotional with that because I realized everything I've been searching for was coming closer than it had ever before in my life. And when I got to talking about going back home to Talihara, I noticed that certain individuals who I would later find out had connections to me before this life, they almost got mad, like they were being betrayed about me talking about going back home. It's like there was almost like this vibe to them, like, "Hey, you're supposed to be here. What's going on?" And that ended up being the first indicator. But I will say this. This individual has asked of me not to give any identifying information to protect her privacy. I'm already kind of walking the line, having shared as much as I have. But I'm hoping by now she knows I'm not meaning anything negative by it and that she trusts me enough to say this. So don't expect any major updates towards, any major reveals to that just yet. Let's see how the future unfolds. But I will say this. My wife has been found. And what kind of separated this woman from everybody else was a couple of different things. The major one was that when she was asking me for advice because she felt like someone was trying to get her attention, The biggest, or at least for me, is that another little bit of a news flash. My oldest daughter, the one I'm listed as Olivia, has gotten married. She's married herself to a nice guy. They're already talking about having kids, and I'm just like, I'm too young to be a grandpa. Anyway, Michael, our son, my son couldn't be there physically, but there was a lot of people who were in attendance through holograms. And there was a lot of people who were there physically as well. The youngest daughter, she's came up to me all excited when she realized I was there. It was like, she goes, Daddy, 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 you found mommy. You found mommy. Yeah, it's like, whoa. He was like, I did? Yeah. I was like, all right, go play, honey. Go play. There was a point where I get to go slow dancing with my wife, Evina, and I had to ask her, we were already a little bit emotional. It's our daughter's wedding. I had to ask her. It's like, okay, is this woman, is she you? And as we're dancing, tears start to build up in her eyes. She's not even able to speak to me directly because she's trying to hold back her emotion. And she just nods her head, crying. And as I'm focusing in on her, I see glimpses of her thinking back. The version of my wife I'm seeing is from this point in time's relative future. She physically remembers these meetings, and that's why she's always had kind of a hesitation about coming forward. Personality-wise, her and this woman are very similar. They look almost identical. It's just that her other body is slightly taller and has more of an Asian appearance to her. Just because that's just how the Tascaru look. And naturally, I knew there was limitations behind what she could share. But I just had to ask her, I was like, is there anything I need to know right now so I can be ready for what's coming? She gives me this sigh. She's looking deep in my eyes, and the next thing I know, she's looking at me and said, just please be patient with her. This is going to be a lot for her to take in. You've had time to adjust. She's going to need that time as well. Just be patient. Promise me that. It's like, okay, I will. And shortly after that, it was time for the daddy-daughter dance. And as I'm dancing with my daughter, she realizes that I'm starting to piece everything together. She asked me, Dad, are you okay? He's like, you already know the answer to that, don't you? She's like, yeah, I know. It's like I told you. Mommy's going to need your help. Just keep fighting, Daddy. You've got this. And there was a point where we had to leave. The party was still going on, but we had to leave to come back. My wife is following me. There was a point where we're walking down away from this venue, and we're walking down this path that looks like it's surrounded by this forest. And we're just kind of going about getting ready to leave, head back to Earth. As I now know, I realize she's starting to stray behind me a little bit, and I'm looking back. I can see both my wife and this woman that came forward. I could see both of their image. I could see both of them practically overlapping one another. And that's something that happened from time to time when I knew that Alarian was active. Was that when I would see him, I would see flashes of both me and him sort of like superimposed on one another. And it was just, and even as I'm saying this, I know I don't, part of me not wants to say this because there's still things that need to be sorted out. Like I said, this is fresh information. And this is something that I've been trying to find for 16 years. And now it's starting to come together and it is overwhelming. Not in a bad way. I mean, it's been incredible. But at the same time, I'm also hesitant because I don't want to, upset this girl in any way. But that's when it started to lock into me. It's like, holy shit, we found each other. And baby number 4 is on the way. My wife upstairs, the Taskaru woman, she is pregnant. She was about a few months along. I think because of the work situations she gets into, she opts to have the baby transferred into a pregnancy pod for her to carry the rest of the term. And I'll say this again. She's asked me to not give too much identifying information. And I think I've done a good job about that. But I want to respect her because I know that she still has her doubts about this type of stuff. And that's why when she came forward, I wanted to help her because I knew of that uncertainty. I knew of that constant self-doubt. But when the possibility of her being an incarnation of my wife, without sounding like too much like a sci-fi Dracula, like, you are an incarnation of my bride. I knew that I also had to fulfill my promise to Olivia that when she appeared to me when I went to Paris years ago. And that was to always keep fighting because her mom was going to need my help. In the end, I think it sort of resonates to something even more important, though. It speaks true to what this is all really about. You hear Elena talking about how the main drive behind the Galactic Federation is to allow for balance in the universe. But at the same time, there's an aspect of it that's about integration with other cultures, sharing technology and information, helping one another simply because it's the right thing to do. And if anything, that's been the whole lesson behind my family. Is that even though the whole situation is confusing, there's aspects of it where there's slight mistranslations due to differences in culture, we still come together because we recognize each other as equals. And I think that's a good way to segue into the final question for this video.
What is your recommendation for people to be ready to welcome galactic civilization?
If I had to place any grand lesson on this entire journey, no matter how brutal no matter how dark, no matter how confusing the situation may have been at times. The importance is to follow through with love. Show nothing but love and respect to your fellow beings. Someone asked this question on a video not too long ago, asking, what would people need to do in order to be ready for galactic civilization? I think the most important thing that we can do right now as individuals, especially with all this push to try to go for World War III going on in the media right now, is that we need to stop finding reasons to hate each other and start working together, start recognizing each other as sentient beings just trying to understand the world. Lead from the heart, not spread so much judgment. We need to show that with the beings that are here on this earth before we try to welcome anybody else. There's this mentality that a lot of people seem to have when it comes to the extraterrestrials, where they're essentially put on pedestals and it's being approached at like almost a religion. And that these individuals are going to come down from the sky, they're going to give us all this miraculous technology and help us with all this information and blah, blah, blah. They're going to save us and blah, 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 blah. We have the power to save ourselves. Why are we waiting for someone else? They're more than willing to try to help us out. They are. But in the end, it's us having to come together and work together with our own people. That's going to be the most important thing. Coming together to work together to make everything better together. That's what's important. And until we recognize that we should do that with the people on this earth, people upstairs, they're going to be a little bit hesitant to come down in mass. It's as simple as that. Follow through with love, no matter what happens. When you follow through with love, you genuinely want to achieve things. And when you genuinely want to achieve things, you will find every excuse in the book to make it happen. That's what's important. And that's how we will get ready in the long run to join galactic civilization. It's hard for me to share these details. Now, it may seem easy because I get into the public eye and like talking about this and written books and all that, but it is hard for me to talk about this. But I also know that if I don't talk about it, I won't be able to learn about it, to grow and potentially help others. That's what I want to do with this show. That's what I want to do with this company. Find ways to help others. Even if it's just putting the information out there for them to find. It's up to them whether or not they follow through. And as far as my Star family situation, again, I will share what I can, but I have to approach things with a certain diligence, just to respect the wishes of those who I've come to become quite fond of and honestly don't want to ever lose. So, not that I ever doubt that that's a possibility, but if you got some good people in your life that want to see you become something better, that are willing to stick by you through thick and thin, even break all known logic of time and space. That's not someone you ever turn your back on. That is someone you never betray. My name is Dakota Frandsen. I am the specialist of the strange CEO of the Bonkers Network, LLC. And I'll see y'all next time.